information as well to connect to people. So, all right, well, welcome everyone. Hello, good afternoon, good morning to everyone joining us today. My name is Jyoti Bisbee, Executive Committee member of WAPPP. I'm truly excited to launch a topic crucial for achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Especially in this particular session, we'll be discussing SDG 5, 9, 16, and 17, the importance of gender equity in small-scale PPPs. So today's webinar, Fostering Women-Led Climate Resilient Small-Scale PPPs in Agriculture Supply Chains, is being held in collaboration with Women in Logistics and Transport and the World Association of PPP Units and Professionals and the Africa Resource Center for Excellence in Supply Chain Management. This joint effort reflects our shared commitment to inclusive leadership, climate resilience, and sustainable development through gender-responsive infrastructure and supply chain strategies. There are two very important topics under discussion today. First, small-scale PPPs. And if you have attended our 2024 program, we focus the entire year on this particular issue. We have recognized that traditional approach to PPPs focusing mostly on large-scale projects by national authorities falls short in significantly advancing the SDGs. To make a real difference, it's vital to efficiently deliver small-scale PPP projects across all subnational levels. Recognizing this need, WAPPP has made this a corporate priority since last year to explore effective strategies focusing on small-scale PPPs. Second, the significant and growing gap in gender equity in low and middle-income countries. Gender equity gap refers to the disparity in how PPPs address gender equality, particularly in areas like project design, stakeholder engagement, and employment opportunities. PPPs can be a tool to promote gender equality, but it's crucial to integrate these considerations throughout the project lifecycle to ensure equitable outcomes. We will discuss and more, starting with our excellent session today. So here I am. I'm delighted to introduce Ms. Azuka Okeke. Azuka is the Chief Executive Officer of ARC ESM. She oversees supply chain transformation projects in Nigeria and supported other African countries in strengthening their health systems. She is best known for her expertise in engaging governments and development partners, helping them prioritize and invest in healthy supply chain programs in Africa. So Azuka, over to you.
So just to be sure that you can hear me, but if you can't, let me know. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from. It's an honor to welcome you all to this important international webinar on gender equity in public-private partnerships. And this is all about fostering women-led climate resilient small-scale PPPs in agriculture supply chains, like Jyoti just told us. Today, we gather from various corners of the globe to explore one of the most pressing challenges and opportunities, and I would say in Africa's development. We have other colleagues here from Asia, and some based even in the global north. But for me, it's something that at KSM, we really prioritize this webinar because we're looking at how we empower women, driving inclusive growth through strategic partnerships in the supply chain sector, a new area for us in Africa. So this webinar is really pivotal to where we're going to. As the CEO of RKSM, I'm privileged to stand before such a distinguished group of thought leaders, practitioners, and advocates for gender equity. The panelists here are women I've been following through for the past few days, and I would say some weeks, and their passion, how they are examining and reimagining public-private partnership. I've been quite inspired. And I hope as you're part of us, you will, spend this time, whether we are here for an hour, 2 hours, just to hear that, the heart of their ideas for transformation. Africa is the world's second largest and second most populous continent with a rich and diverse history. We all know that. An undeniable potential for growth. So for me, Growth must be built on principles of fairness, opportunity, and access. Women, who make up half of the continent's population, remain unfortunately marginalized in many sectors of the economy, particularly when we look at agriculture. So again, in Nigeria, for instance, women contribute significantly to the agricultural sector, a critical component of the supply chain. Yet, many face barriers to accessing capital, training, technology, and decision-making roles. This is where public-private partnerships can play a transformative role. By rethinking how partnerships are structured, we can create a more inclusive supply chain that actively empowers women in leadership roles, entrepreneurship, and innovation. So for me, public-private partnerships are inherently designed to leverage the strength of both sectors, government stability and oversight, and private sector efficiency and innovation. And that's what I've been doing for a long time in Nigeria as a CEO of ARC. How do we bring that stability from government, the oversight, and bring the private sector efficiency and innovation? If we're to reimagine these partnerships to empower women, we must focus on 3 key areas. So as you're here, and I hope the women in the panel and every other person that will be speaking, that you address these 3 key areas. Access to opportunities. PPPs must be designed to open doors for women-led businesses in the supply chain. This means creating platforms for women entrepreneurs to participate in large-scale supply chain projects. We need to talk about that. How do we open opportunities for women? Policy and regulatory is the second one. What are the supports? What are governments going to do, both in Africa and globally, that must craft policies that ensure gender equity in PPPs? We need to look at policies, because if not, whatever solutions we come up with, they will not be sustainable. We must look at things like equal pay. We must look at family-friendly working conditions. We must offer incentives for businesses that prioritize gender diversity in their supply chain. All these are things I'm hoping that we pick from today's webinar. Of course, education and training. In order to create a workforce that can thrive in the modern supply chain ecosystem, we must invest in education and skills development. So I'm hoping that the discussion today will really look at these 3 key areas: education, policy, and of course, opening opportunities, creating new ways, creative ways, innovative ways for women to be prioritized. So in conclusion, as we move forward with today's discussion, I urge each of you to consider not only how we can enhance the efficiency and sustainability of our supply chains, but how we can do so in a way that actively uplifts women, how we can do so in a way that is creating a ripple effect that benefits communities, economies, and nations. Our commitment as RKSM to gender equity is not only on a moral imperative, but also an economic one. So thank you for joining us today. I look forward to hearing your insights and ideas as we work together to build a future that is inclusive, dynamic, and empowered by the full potential of every woman. Let's create the future of supply chains, one that includes everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Azuka, for
Dr. Ogo, thank you so much, Azuka. Do you want to introduce Dr. Ogo?
Well, go ahead, Dr. Ogo. You're already up. So I think she's already coming.
Okay, so let me introduce Dr. Ogo, because this is a very special panel we have, and I want to really thank Azuka Okeke for that wonderful opening. And it's really an honor for us to have Dr. Ogo as our moderator. So I'm pleased to introduce and showcase our beautiful panel, starting with our moderator, Dr. Ogo Chebuku Ogboma. I hope I pronounced that correctly, a distinguished academic and industry consultant specializing in transport, logistics, and supply chain management. With over 2 decades of experience, Dr. Ogboma combines her extensive research background with practical consulting expertise, offering insights into supply chain quality assurance, public-private partnerships, and sustainable logistic practices. She is a global vice chairperson of the Women in Logistics and Transport for North and West Africa, a special interest group of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport. So over to you, Dr. Ogo.
Thank you, Jyoti and Azuka for the excellent opening and introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, once again to all our distinguished participants who are joining us from around the world today. Like Jyoti introduced, I'm Dr. Gochukwu Boman and have the honor of moderating today's timely and, will I say, high impact webinar titled Fostering Women-Led Climate Resilient Small-Scale PPPs in Agriculture Supply Chains. As we all know, this important session, like it has been said, is brought to you through a very unique and strategic collaboration between the Women in Logistics and Transport, WILAT, the World Association of PPP Units and Professionals, and the Africa Resource Center for Excellence in supply chain management. And until recently, when I was appointed as the Global Vice Chairperson of Women in Logistics and Transport for North and West Africa, I took up this ESG, which is one of our main pillars. I took it up as my focus for North and West Africa. And that culminated into this strategic collaboration with ARC-ESM and WAPPP. So today's conversation sits at the intersection of gender equity, climate resilience, and sustainable development, and the three pillars that are indispensable to achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, as Jyoti had highlighted, the SDGs 5, 9, 13, and 17. So before we move ahead, we just have a few housekeeping that we need to keep up with. If you have your questions, you can put it in the Q&A or in the chat. And if you're not speaking, you could kindly mute yourself if it comes on. And if you like to speak, you can just use the icon to raise your hand. So throughout the session, we're going to hear from a distinguished panel of experts and practitioners, who bring a wealth of experience from policy, enterprise, academia, and community-based development. And I really encourage you all to engage actively. So my first panelist that I will call on is reimagined Pemo, who is currently the co-chair of the Gender Equity in Public-Private Partnerships Chapter of the World Association of Public-Private Partnerships Units and Professionals, and serves as a board director for the Dagachu Hydropower Project, a state-owned enterprise in Bhutan. And we also have Margherita Dorso, who is the founder of Egvita Italia. It's a management consulting firm with hands-on experience with international funded institutions across multiple countries. Then we have Mr. Dorjitashi. He serves as the Chief Executive Officer of the Food Corporation of Bhutan, one of the country's oldest state-owned enterprises. Then we have Hannah Matu. She specializes in ERP implementations, enterprise resource planning, implementations, due diligence, corporate governance and compliance. A dynamic entrepreneur, she co-founded Africa Luxury Expo, a premier luxury brands event showcasing 20 lifestyle segments. So I would now like to invite Ms. Reimagined Pemo to share some of the case studies that she's been working and some of her personal experiences highlighting how women leaders are driving inclusive leadership that fuels innovation, fosters impactful private partnerships, and strengthens supply chains to build a more resilient and efficient future. Ms. Reimagined, I yield the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ogo, for the introduction. Greetings and Kusu Zangpola to all the participants here. It's an honor to be part of this webinar. This webinar is more than just a knowledge-sharing platform. It's an opportunity to strengthen our global network, support each other, and spark new collaborations. So I look forward to it. So today I'll share the insights from my own experience, how integrating gender equity into PPPs does not just empower women, but enhances efficiency, strengthens supply chain, and delivers a sustainable outcome. If you talk about the gender gap globally, despite global efforts, gender parity remains an unfinished agenda, irrespective of the country status. According to the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report 2024, the world has closed just around 68.5% of its gender gap, so there is more to do. Likewise, in Bhutan, Bhutan stands around fourth in South Asia region and 124th globally. While Bhutan has made important progress in gender equity, a significant gap still remains. So fortunately, Bhutan's development philosophy, rooted in gross national happiness and aligned with the Sustainable Development Goal, prioritizes gender equity. Under the visionary leadership of our His Majesty the King, women empowerment is not only enshrined in law, but translated into real policy actions, making inclusion a cornerstone to national progress. Now to share my own personal experience, when I was a public servant, I served as the head of the Investment and Corporate Governance Division under the Ministry of Finance, where I oversaw several state-owned enterprises, including one in the livestock sector that was in serious distress, financially unstable, operationally inefficient, and in dire need for a change. So we initiated to bring a change. What made the transformation possible was inclusive leadership. I had the privilege of working alongside the dynamic, visionary female board chair and a receptive CEO and management. Their openness to the innovation and collaborative mindset made all the differences. We adopted a participatory cross-sectoral approach, forming a task force of experts in finance, business, economics, and operations. Together with the company's management, senior leaders from the ministry, we co-created solutions and secured alignments from key sectors, including private sectors and other state-owned enterprises. So the key outcome of that assignment or exercise included, number one, a business model transformation, where we shifted from centralized retail to a franchise-based model, operating doors for local entrepreneurs through PPPs, mostly operated by women, which saves expenses in million newtons for the company and created business opportunity for the private sectors. Secondly, we optimize the supply chain from the raw material sourcing to production and logistics. We streamlined operations for better efficiency and cost control. Thirdly, financial sustainability. We helped secure cheaper financing and adopted strategic cost and debt management practices for the company. Fourth, productive enhancement. We streamlined the process, replaced with demand-driven production, Excel-based costing, production planning tools, and practical resource planning were also developed for the company. Capacity building with support from JICA, we conducted a Kaizen workshop in embedding the culture of continuous improvement and other hands-on experience or training to the company employees, which led to operational and management efficiencies. So the lesson learned from the exercise, firstly, inclusive leadership delivers innovation and improves efficiency. When women are meaningfully included, they build trust, drive change, and produce long-term impact. Secondly, small-scale PPPs can have a large-scale effect. With the right design grounded in community needs, co-led by women, they strengthen resilience and local ownership. So lastly, I would like to stop here by highlighting that it wasn't just a financial turnaround. It was a cultural shift, I would say. So therefore, it's not about numbers. It's about the productive engagement of women and giving them the right platform to perform. And if given, as we have seen, they can deliver. Thank you very much. And over to you, Ogo.
Thank you so much, Rinzin, for that fantastic presentation. It was quite brief, but very well loaded. And I noticed the last thing you said about not just being a financial transformation, but a cultural shift. What strategies helped embed, that culture of continuous improvement, particularly in, a traditionally male-dominated environment?
Okay, thank you, Ogo, for your question. Well, as mentioned that it is not in financial, turnaround. It was a cultural shift, meaning we adopted that inclusive approach. So when we adopted that inclusive approach, then, be it at the local level, be it at the involvement of all people involved in every process of the business, then it becomes, the ownership is there. When there is a ownership, people try to be involved and then try to perform well. When they try to perform well, it leads to the delivering of quality, be it infrastructure or service, and it leads to sustainability. So, so that is where the inclusiveness will, bring a mindset shift or change that makes people to be involved and perform, leading to the sustainable growth, and ultimately will be achieving the socio-economic development as, as a whole. So that's what we have learned. But having said that, there are more to do. We have to explore more. We can improve further. That's it. Thank you. Over to Ogo.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rinzin, for your wonderful presentation and explanation. Okay, without wasting time, we move next to, we would like to invite Ms. Margarita Dorso to share her experiences from working on women's empowerment, business planning, and mitigating socioeconomic environmental risks from countries like Indonesia and Central Asia. Ms. Margarita, please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Ugo and colleagues, for inviting me to speak today. Gender equality and women empowerment is a topic that for our firm is very at our heart, I would say. We have been implementing projects across Central Asia mainly, but also Africa, in Mozambique, in Indonesia, Turkey, the Caucasus. So I would say that we have a sort of different experience when it comes to best tools to ensure the women empowerment. And delving into detail to our experience, trying to make it very pragmatic and very, reality-based, I have to admit that many times and very often the tendency when there is international assistance on women support, on women empowerment, is to treat women as beneficiary of the program. Whereas to ensure proper empowerment of the women have to be perceived as economic agents, organizers, drivers of local resilience, and community leaders. In many of our projects we have implemented in rural areas, we met such brilliant women that despite the challenges, despite the stereotypes, they do amazing job, but very often this job is informal, is not recognized, and it's not properly grasped from the different capacity building training program that are offered on the ground. So this leads to, it can have two possible solutions, First of all is, of course, to ensure that there is a proper private sector engagement in whatever initiatives women should be involved in, because private sector can serve as a catalyzer for employing women, for ensuring that they are in the supply chain. As an example and as a benchmark, I can provide you the example of Uzbekistan, where textile sector is very strong. There are many women, for instance, that do very informal business when it comes to textile. And since they are not properly connected with major producers, they are somehow left behind. They cannot grow, they cannot thrive, they cannot scale up their business. The second important, let's say, mitigation measure to avoid that this program are, you know, the millionth cathedral in the desert, I would say, is to ensure that social mobilizers are engaged in the program, in every program. Who are these social mobilizers? They are cultural translators, they are facilitators, they are early mentors, they are people that are not only, let's say, expert in a specific field, but they are sort of role models. If a woman, especially in remote areas, in rural areas, sees a person that made it, a person that, you know, was successful, and this person is there to mentor, to take hand in hand these women groups, these participants to entrepreneurial mindset, then there is a very much higher success rate for ensuring the sustainability of whatever capacity building or training program is run. And on the top of that, we have to consider as well that in every rural community, there are always women leaders. And these are the people that, you know, are a sort of locomotive. They will throw the others forward for the prosperity of a particular region, a particular context, sorry, to ensure that entrepreneurship is, I mean, it grows also in that particular sector, field, and geographic area. On the top of that, as you, Ogo, were rightfully pinpointing, we have also had some experience in Southeast Asia, in Indonesia. We all know that Southeast Asia is very sensitive to climate change. We know that there is a very high attention and hotspot when it comes to investment to ensure a just energy transition, not just energy transition, to make sure that whatever renewable energy project, any new technology takes into consideration also vulnerable categories, meaning people in the rural areas, but especially women. That are the one, according to the studies of World Bank and other donors, often the one left behind from this transition because they work in informal sector related to the supply chain of the energy. And with this transition, they are often left behind. So in this case, you know, the energy transition also linking to the last question you raised to our colleague Renzin, I believe there is a big opportunity, especially for those new sectors in the energy that are still not male dominated, to ensure that women thrive and can further participate in this particular segment and economic opportunities. For instance, in one project that we have been running in Uzbekistan, we realized that energy audit and energy planning for public building was a very niche market where women were not present at all, but also male. It's a new sector in the country. And in order to, you know, let's say, use this opportunity, what we did was to partner with the Tashkent Technical University. We developed a curriculum on energy audit. We delivered it only to women students, so that already when they graduate, they can offer this type of services and they can enter into a market that is still free, is not yet male dominated. And I believe that in this respect, solar energy batteries, operation and maintenance, energy audit, as well as other sector can constitute a huge opportunity to ensure that women can you know, diversify. Otherwise, every project focuses on textile, on food production, on agriculture, whereas there are so many things that women are good at that we should try to engage them.
Okay. I suppose you're rounding off with that. Thank you so very much for highlighting some of your case studies. Most interesting is the last one on the energy project in Uzbekistan, and how you were able to channel your energy towards the female students and introduce them to this new area. So what I hear really is that women are really the engines behind, a lot of development in our communities. Though that they still have those stereotypes, and many of the jobs that they do are not formal, they are not recognized, and so somehow they are relegated to the background. So, but then I would just like to ask you, how then do you think that many of these communities and many of these women that are in these communities that are doing a lot of wonderful, significant jobs, will be brought to the limelight and will be supported, both financially, socially, emotionally, and otherwise?
I would like to answer you with one quote from one lady I met in Tajikistan at the border with Afghanistan, when we were discussing with the Ministry of Agriculture of Tajikistan, and they were insisting the program should give more money to the women, to run their farms and to scale up their farms. And when I met some of these women, they said, we don't want money. We want capacity. We want extension services provided.
Absolutely, yes.
Because unfortunately, Hugo, I know you would agree with me, perhaps the money, when they come, but often you don't know where they go, right? So women seems to be aware of that, and that's why they want to learn and to walk on their steps. On the other side, I cannot speak, of course, for Nigeria or other countries, but a real, authentic policy and implementation of the policy needs to be guaranteed at state level. Because many governments, they have very beautiful statements, very beautiful, goals aligned with all the sustainable development goals. But when it comes to practice, seems it's only propaganda, so there must be really a real implementation pattern to ensure that whatever is written on paper reflects the reality. And just to close with a very funny, situation I experienced, in Tajikistan, at the border again of Afghanistan, there are women that do an amazing job when it comes to agriculture. They are de facto the owner of these farms.
Yeah.
But the jure, they are not. The land is always under the name of the husband or the father, who often are abroad. They go to work to Russia and send remittances. And when I met this lady, she was so proud that she was the jure owner of the land, that proudly she told me, I'm the jure owner of my land, because my husband died of heart attack. And she was very, very happy about this turnout, because finally she was recognized her role
As
as
the owner of the land, yes, yes. Thank you so much, Margarita, for your insights. Quite interesting experience you have there. And may I also remind the audience, the participants, if you have questions, please do well and put them up in the chat. You can see we have very well-experienced panelists that are speaking out from their own experiences, out from the work that they've done in the field. And we have a lot to learn from them. So please do well and post your questions. We will get to them one after the other. So we now call on Mr. Dorjitashi for his own presentation. He's the CEO, Food Corporation of Bhutan Limited, and he's going to present insights into the supply chain aspects of trading agricultural produce, discussing the challenges and success stories faced by Bhutan's state-owned enterprise in creating resilient, sustainable agricultural supply chains. Mr. Jyoti, over to you, and please let our audience know where Bhutan is and what you guys are doing. Thank you so much, Mr.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone, and Kuzo Sangpola. As rightly introduced, I'll be sharing my practical experience more from the agriculture supply chain in which my company is actively involved. And prior to my current position, I was also leading one of the civil society organizations, organization that is dedicated in promoting youth entrepreneurship. Um, Let me start by providing a quick overview of Bhutan to set the stage. Bhutan, as you may know, is one of the smallest countries in the world, located between China and India, and with just a little over 700,000 people. And we have a total land area of about 38,000 square meter, out of which we only have 3.7% arable land. Nevertheless, agriculture is one of the main sources of economy, and it contributes 19.1% to our GDP. And the sector employs 64.9% of the total workforce, and out of which 52.3% are women. Some of the main cash crops includes cardamom, apple, oranges, ginger, and of course a wide range of vegetables. And India is one of our main trading partner for agricultural products. When it comes to supply chain, I would like to believe that we have fairly a good supply chain system in the country. And this is primarily because our government plays a big role in strengthening the logistics and supply chain. Government constructs roads to every single village, provides water supply to their farms, operate dedicated banks, making access to credit easy. And the government also provides free seeds and subsidized greenhouse facilities. And this support from the government actually helps to boost production and start agribusinesses. And when it comes to the logistics, state-owned enterprises like the company that I manage, which is Food Corporation of Bhutan, helps our farmers to export their farm produces through operation of auction yards in different strategic locations. And there is also another state-owned enterprise who directly buys a wide range of rice and grains directly from the farmers, have it processed, and distributes in the market nationwide. Similarly, we also have something called CSI, Cottage Small Industry Market, actually a single market outlet where entrepreneurs can directly sell their processed agri products to them, and they eventually make it available to the customers. As a part of the post-harvest management, my company operates cold store facilities in different strategic locations for farmers, and we also operate vegetable processing plants at different strategic locations in the communities, so that farmers can bring their products, avail our service. They can wash, dry, grate, and pack their products, either for export or a local retail market. So in Bhutan, I would like to believe that we have an excellent coordination between different agencies. And, inspired by the vision to support our local economy, government agencies help to create farmer groups. We have hundreds of farmer groups in different parts of the country, and they help them link with the schools. We have 494 schools who are linked with different farmers groups, and they get to supply their fresh fruits and vegetables directly to the schools. And similarly, my company works very closely with farmers groups to supply fresh fruits and vegetables to 4 major training institutions in different locations of the country. So all in all, we have active participation of women, from the decision making to production to the trading. For instance, the former Director General of Department of Agriculture Marketing, she was women, and the current Director General of Department of Livestock is also women, and a CEO of Bhutan Development Bank, and here people popularly call it as Farmers Bank, is also managed by a female CEO. So in production, we have about 52.3% women participation, and I believe we have about 46% women in agriculture trading and 93% in agri retail business. But having that said, we also have our own share of bottlenecks. Number one challenge is the global warming. There has been reports where orange trees, bearing less and less fruits, and eventually dying up the orange trees. And similarly, there were several cases were reported where water sources were died up. So these were reported to be due to global warming, which I believe is happening globally. And also, Bhutan is located in the Himalayan mountain range with a rugged terrain. So we have very little scope for commercialization and mechanization. That is another major bottleneck. And also, Bhutan, as you may have heard, remains under forest coverage, 70% of our total land area. So which is why human wildlife conflict is a growing concern. So reports show that farmers lose about 30% of their crop to wild animals annually. And also youth migration from rural to urban areas. And the recent trend that we have been facing is that, youth traveling abroad in search of greener pasture has also resulted in workforce shortage in the farming. But lastly, but not the least, I think due to smallness of our country, both in terms of size and also in terms of population, our domestic market is very small. But having that said, we have dedicated government departments, civil society organizations, and the institutes who have special programs in supporting women entrepreneurs in agriculture and agriculture supply chain. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. Your presentation, provides a snapshot really of Bhutan's agricultural supply chain ecosystem, with focused on, government support mechanisms and notably growing female participation. Again, yes, I noted that you said in 2023 that about 52.3% of agricultural workers in Bhutan were women, outpacing men with 37.3%. Wow. Wow, that's and the women are rising as entrepreneurs, especially in organic farming, in hydroponics and food processing. Wow, that's really quite encouraging. And that's why we keep saying that we are the intersection of where women are the backbones, the engines to economic development in almost all the countries of the world. So Bhutan has made this notable progress in supporting women's participation in agriculture. What specific policies or incentives have been most effective in encouraging these women-led agribusiness in the supply chain?
I think among the incentives, the number one, as has been, I think, correctly pointed out by one of the earlier speakers, is to, train women entrepreneurs. I think you've now increasingly women entrepreneurs, they come up with a lot of ideas, but to put their ideas on a piece of paper and to bring their idea life, I think it is important that government and relevant agencies train them, give them more confidence. And number two is, I feel, exposure and networking. For any entrepreneur, be it man or woman, some level of exposure is essential. And it is through exposure one gets to learn from the best practices, share their ideas, enrich their networking. And this is important because supply chain in agriculture is not easy. So therefore, entrepreneurs need someone, preferably mentors, to talk to so that they can validate their ideas, come up with pragmatic measures to mitigate the challenges, and move forward with better plan. And also, in Bhutan, I do not know in others, but in Bhutan, we have a dedicated department and government agencies who helps to, explore market for the entrepreneurs. We may have competing women entrepreneurs with a range of brilliant products, but products on its own is just going to build up the inventory. At some point, products would also expire. So it is crucial that government agencies, Chamber of Commerce and CSOs help to explore market for them. So I think these were some of the incentives provided by the government. And also In Bhutan, we have a dedicated bank. It's called Bhutan Development Bank. And, farmers popularly call it as Farmers Bank. And they have a special program that encourages, they create easy access to finance, mainly to encourage farmers and mostly to women entrepreneurs. And we also have a dedicated civil society organization just for women, encouraging them to embark on the entrepreneurial journey, mostly into agriculture.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I wish you all the best. You're really doing a great job with the women. So we are moving very well. And we have Ms. Hannah Matu. She's going to share her experiences about being an entrepreneur in community development. We'd love to hear what you have been doing. Over to you, Hannah.
Certainly, and good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you're watching us from. My name again is Hannah Matu, and I must say from the previous panel that's spoken, I'm thinking maybe I need to move to Bhutan, Mr. Dodgy.
Absolutely.
Yes, some pivotal points to my slides, hopefully that I'll share shortly. And if you allow me, for the sake of the presentation, I will just and share my video so I can be able to present. But nonetheless, I've put together some slides that I think from what we've heard from Azuka around how do we enable or open ways, creative ways, be it from a policy perspective, education and training for communities to excel in the various activities they need to do in community development. And over and above that, I think Margarita also mentioned in which is a vital and pivotal point, the point about empowering women. And the fact that one of the women stated that they don't need the money, but instead need access and change to policies, that for me resonated quite much. That said, the first slide that you're looking at basically touches on the fact that, as we know, Africa is 60% of the world's, has 60% of the world's arable land. And we have a booming youth population. As stated, I think the last time I checked, it said the ratio of men to women is roughly 2 to 3 to 1. So 2 to 3 women to 1. In itself, that tells you that we have a lot of women and a lot of youth, because of course, with the fact that a lot of us are then mothers, that means we then have a lot of youth and a big population that we need to factor in. And with that in itself, we then need to look at how do we aid both this population around, majority being women and the youth. And one of the things that I've identified being on the ground in some countries like Malawi, the DRC, and I'm specifically talking about these two countries because I do have a lot of programs running on the ground that are quite from a subsistence perspective. And a lot of this population is unemployed, right? And a lot of these countries are underdeveloped. So it's important that we factor that in. So we can move to the next slide, please. That said, this slide basically looks at how much land we have, the number of population we're talking to. Specifically, I looked at these two countries that I've mentioned, and with the exception of DRC, which has a lot of natural resources, as you understand, but primarily to today's discussion around agriculture, if you look at DRC in itself, it's got quite a huge land capacity. And I can vouch to you that the land is extremely, extremely fertile, being in that it actually holds one of the biggest forestry in Africa. That in itself should tell you a lot. And from this, I've identified that there's a need to then identify ways we can empower the population, be it women or the youth, to become informal traders or small-scale traders, either in doing agricultural activities or possibly even looking at local manufacturing, right? In these specific economies, because most of these economies are rural communities, or I would say economies, and most of them would not have access to basic infrastructure, right? Like roads and water access and all of that. So I'll deep dive into it, but this graph kind of gives a kind of a synopsis of where we sit from an Africa perspective when it comes to elements around tech and how we adopt technology. You can see we're just below the average mark, with a few countries taking the lead in West Africa like Nigeria, and in East Africa like Kenya, for example, and in the South will be South Africa. But holistically, from an Africa perspective, technology is something that we need to look at. And with that, of course, unemployment becomes quite high. We can move into the next slide. So how do we then look at our communities and utilize what we have to then, empower ourselves, right? What I said is we need to find how do we look at the needs of these communities first, understanding our basic cultures, right? And identify opportunities around this culture. Earlier on, there was a mention around possibly part of the land being owned, as part of the cultural values in some countries, part of the land being owned primarily by men. How do we then diversify our policies to then include women? That's one thing. There's also a big element around chiefs in a lot of African countries, right? A lot of the chiefs, a lot of communities are held by chiefs or owned or led by chiefs. How do we then incorporate discussions with these specific African leaders to then either lease the land to then grow or create subsistence farming of sorts? And then from there, of course, then once we have the raw crops, we then look at how do we then come up with small manufacturing elements to then stimulate these economies. Because it's one thing that you have the crops, but if you cannot diversify your produce to then have an export value, then you don't have that full end-to-end chain that then adds to the economy. And then over and above that, how do we create opportunities or solutions that are more innovative, right? In Africa, as you know, being a growing economy around innovation, a lot of us now have smartphones. And that means a lot of us would then utilize different elements of what's available. And how can we then utilize what is available to us to then be able to mobilize ourselves to then create resources and create basically value and return on investment on what we plant. And of course, from there, we now look at a community impact perspective where, of course, a lot of us will then be, I think, better enriched, right? Because then from a community perspective where there is, I would say, subsistence farming, you'd find that the women who would ordinarily sell tomatoes in the streets are now able to sell tomatoes on a large scale. And that means in itself, the community in a larger perspective then is seen to add more to the country's economy. We can now move on to the next slide. So again, you can see from this, I show a picture of a caravan of sorts, right? And this is predominantly what we see in a lot of Africa. I made mention of women selling tomatoes on the streets. In South Africa, primarily, you'd find a lot of this, they'd either call it a caravan or a kiosk of sort, right? So how do we then utilize what we have from an innovative perspective and make it a bit more, what's it called, ideal for the wild community, right? So it's not seen to still have the same idea of impoverished Africa, right? How do we utilize what we have to create small-scale retail stores, right? In the case of a kiosk of a caravan, and then from there, ultimately transforming into by adding more things like electricity to these things, which will then help us in digitalizing some of our systems to be able to then look at bigger markets, right? Because we understand that some of these things are things that we struggle with in some African countries, specifically to the countries that I mentioned, like, for example, Malawi. As much as the country is growing from an economic perspective, there are elements or there are parts of the country where they don't necessarily have the right infrastructure, including having electricity challenges. So how do we then tap into other opportunities like putting up a kiosk that has a solar system, which will then drive the electronic devices within that shop to allow these subsistence farmers to be able to connect across the country or out of the country, either via the web or WhatsApp, and then sell their produce. So these are some of the things that we need to look at, what we can do with less to create more value. We can move on to the next slide. So pivotal to that is elements around market access. I think I've made mention to this throughout my slide, and it's important ultimately that we are able to support the communities by giving them access to the market. This, I think, was mentioned earlier, that you can plant all the crops, but if you actually don't have the access that you need to sell these crops, then they rot right in front of you. So one of the pivotal points that Africa, especially women, are concerned that we need to consider is elements around manufacturing. How do we set up small manufacturing units, like the women who possibly grow tomatoes? How can we create agro-processing units that then convert this fruit of tomato into something, either be it a tomato paste or ketchup or something to that effect? You know, because right now it's assumed that we have to consume the fruit itself. That's not necessarily the thing that we need to look at. And of course, for us to be able to move from the point where we have a fruit into a manufactured product, we need the element around guiding these people through mentorship, right? Some sort of mentorship. So I would then say, gentlemen, like our panel, Doji needs to maybe consider coming into Africa and through what they've done in Bhutan, looking at how do we then mentor our communities in Africa to then create sustainable manufacturing opportunities. And then, of course, there's the element around, for us to be able to create those mentorship manufacturing opportunities, the element around capital. We need access to capital. This was mentioned earlier by one of our panelists, that we need access to funding, but funding not for the sake of just having money in hand, funding that comes with the technical expertise to then show a true return on investment. So it's important, as we continue to engage with the women on the ground and the youth, we come up with diversified ways of creating these mentorship programs, tapping into the different capital opportunities, and bearing in mind that a lot of, I would say, unfortunate financial I think industries in Africa, I would say from a bank perspective, are not at this point completely geared to agriculture. So that is something that a lot of economies led by the likes of West Africa and East Africa already is being looked at. In South Africa, we have the Land Bank, for example, that looks at how they empower subsistence farmers. But in other countries in Africa, like in West Africa, they have a lot of agricultural-based banking. So those are things that we need to maybe consider holistically in the continent to then empower our women and youth in agriculture. Over to the next slide. So important, and I think this equally been mentioned, is the element around how we then bring together the community, policy enhancements, and the capital, right, to make this a winning formula. From a community support perspective, we know that those land agreements, be it whether it's with the local chiefs, be it whether it's the husbands who own the land versus the wife who owns the land, those kind of discussions need to be held. And there has to be some sort of synergy that's brought in place to support that. Then there's an element around capital access. We don't only look at the big scale financing options. How do we then utilize microfinancing? For example, M-Pesa in Kenya, they've created an element where some of this is able to then go towards attributing or assisting women or youth to then be able to move goods from one place to another, you know? So then you don't need to necessarily, if you have an M-Pesa account and you've been transferring and moving money, and there's that history that can be utilized to give you access to financing, that can then be used to empower you to create a sort of a business that can then empower the farmers, the subsistence farmers, to create the needed opportunities. And then, of course, then enabling the policies, be it whether it's from a tax relief perspective, opening up the market, you know, through informal businesses like what I showed earlier around the caravans and the kiosks. And of course, the permits needed, because in a lot of times we know in some of our African states, when you sell goods in a specific area without a permit, you're then harassed by the officials. But then how do we put the policies in place to ensure that we then support our subsistence farmers and to create that big marketplace? And of course, ultimately creating the needed alignment to then create these amazing entrepreneurs and eventually creating manufacturing spaces that will then create agro-processed produce. So one important thing is the element around road infrastructure or infrastructure in general, be it whether it's water or the likes, and also from an innovation perspective, being able to adapt and move goods from one place to another, procure goods. This is pivotal, and I've pointed it out here. As you can see, there are some fundamental infrastructure gaps that have been identified, some of them being roads infrastructure. Countries like the DRC, as much as the land is fertile, as much as the opportunities for agriculture and agro-processing and manufacturing, because the country is not developed as well as it should be for various reasons that I don't necessarily need to mention today, you'd find that things like roads are not developed. Right now, if you try and move goods, and with the AFTA, which is, as you know, one of the African Free Trade Continental Agreement that is coming in place, it becomes a situation of how do you move goods from one place to another? Like recently, we were trying to ascertain how do we move goods from Tanzania to Kinshasa, which is a part of the DRC, and we realized there are no roads. So you need to use a sea, which means you need to take 3 months to get from one country to another within the same continent, which does not make sense. And you can't use air freight because it's so expensive. So how do we then look at pushing the government to then find a way to put this infrastructure development in place as soon as yesterday, right? Where, of course, it allows, considering the various other issues around politics, but important, I think, it's utilizing what you have in hand at the beginning. So some of these are the barriers to entry for traditional business models, like creating sustainable agricultural businesses. The other part is elements around innovation, mobile solutions, for example. Looking at the likes of the fact that most of the countries now have phones that can utilize WhatsApp. How do we then utilize that, right? To then move goods or engage in groups to move goods from one place to another, right? And then, of course, the element around how do we charge these devices? Do we have an off-grid energy solution in place, right? Through solar, wind, or alternative, or power batteries that can be utilized. So those are some of the things that we have to dig deep into. And also creating other solutions around things like duties, for example. Those in itself create a situation where a lot of the farmers don't know how and what to do post their country. If you're trying to move goods from one country to another, like for example, South Africa right now is trying to relax the import duty, which is currently 25%. That makes it extremely high for a farmer who's trying to move their amazing rice from Malawi into South Africa. So those are some of the things that we need to look at. But in total, I think the policy element is pivotal. So what is the call to action? the call to action is what can we do with what we have right now? Yes, we've all highlighted, or specific to myself, I've highlighted some of the things that are important that need to be looked at from a policy perspective, government perspective in enhancing our infrastructure. But I think what's important is just looking at the basics. Do we have access to land? Once you answer that, does that land have access to basic infrastructure? Can we at least move something from point A to B, right? At least at the bare minimum. Then do we have the finance from a microfinancing perspective or otherwise? And then do we have the mentorship in place to at least get the subsistence farmers to start producing goods and start circulating what is needed in the economy? And then from there, we look at then women in general and say, women, how do they contribute towards this? And how can we empower them further to make this possible? That's all from me. I trust you've all.
Wow. Hannah, I wish you could go on and on and on. This is so loaded, fantastic presentation. And thank you so much for that. From where I'm sitting, I hear things like you highlighting the paradox of Africa's, vast potential versus the persistent poverty, emphasizing that local entrepreneurs, especially the women and the youth, are the engines of inclusive grassroots development. And you also try to identify, the strength within the entrepreneurs, deep local knowledge, secular economic contributions that they have made, their resourcefulness, albeit the infrastructure that is poor. Yeah, then you have also highlighted, community-based innovations too, where they use, makeshift or limited resources to bring about their businesses growing. Then women and youth too are having some form of underutilized forces. And you like to see that women reinvest 90% of their income locally, and the youth are driving digital entrepreneurship. That lots of things that the presentation brought out, especially the power of partnership, community support, access to capital, and even enabling policies. So with all this emphasis on youth and women, not being just beneficiaries, but builders of Africa's future. And what policy shifts are most urgently needed, to see to the elevation of these people, the women and the youth, from the margins to the mainstream in national development plans? Hannah, are you with me?
I'm
You're
muted.
muted. Okay.
Yes, now I'm unmuted. So I think pivotal to your question is identifying ways that we can solve Africa, speaking to Africa, right?
Yes.
Africa problems, creating African specific solutions, right? We know a lot of the land that we sit on is from a rural perspective. And a lot of women who are farming are doing it in isolation, the truth be told, especially in Africa. So what tends to happen is they sell the produce at low prices due to lack of access to markets, right? So I keep saying there are various ways we can grow African specific solutions that will help us to solve real problems within the minimum resources we're operating with. Examples are using, for example, what I mentioned earlier, WhatsApp, all right, to coordinate pickups. And this is where the part where the youth comes in, because the youth are more versatile and they know how to use this digital gadgets, right? So they can, we can create co-ops of sorts where we have women sit together with some youths and create elements around employment with this. And of course, from that, they are able to, from the WhatsApp, they're able to coordinate pickups, negotiate with buyers. There's a lot of things that you can do, be it mobile payments, create farmers groups where you're able to include pre-ordering and all of that. So Africa is being a niche I think a niche farmer has been a niche. We need to create solutions that are fit and purpose to us.
Yeah.
And for
Thank
purpose.
you.
Yes,
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm not seeing those questions. Maybe you want to, the participants now, maybe at the end of the presentations from the panelists, you may want to raise your hands and speak because I'm not seeing questions in the Q&A. But quickly, I'm just going to go round all the panelists again, just starting with Ms. Rinzing. I'm just going to ask you that, drawing from your time, just few minutes to respond, please. Drawing from your time leading Bhutan's PPP unit, how can gender mainstreaming be institutionalized at the early stages of small-scale PPP project design? In 3 minutes, please. Is Ms. Rinzing here? Are you muted? Yes, you are muted. Unmute, please.
Can you hear
Okay.
me?
Yes,
Okay.
please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ogo, for the opportunity again. As you mentioned that, and we already know that everyone is aware, gender equality and women empowerment are increasingly recognized as an essential driver for inclusive economic growth and sustainable development. From this discussion, we are also understanding how important the women play in this ecosystem. So to achieve this, integrating gender perspective into any project life cycle is imperative, and PPP presents a powerful vehicle for doing so. So PPP by design offers a strategic opportunity to harness, we know that the private sector's expertise, innovations, efficiency, and capital. By embedding the gender consideration into the PPP process from the outset out, this project can better respond to differently needed or the need base of different gender and deliver broader socioeconomic benefits, long-term value for the money. And these are the factors, globally the investors are interested to know and they have confidence when they want to invest. From Bhutan's experience institutionalizing gender mainstream at early stage of PPP, scale PPP project, design requires a policy-driven, structured approach. For example, in Bhutan, what we do is, number one, the key steps includes policy alignment. In Bhutan, gender mainstreaming has been institutionalized through a policy-driven system approach. If we want to do a PPP project, all PPP concept nodes should undergo screening to ensure that Bhutan is in line with the policy. It is as per the gross national happiness principles, explicitly aligned with the sustainable development goals. So this ensures that gender considerations are integrated into the early stage of project development, starting with the regulatory framework, feasibility studies, continuing through the stakeholder engagement, design, implementation, evaluation. If we talk about the stakeholder consultation and capacity building, we ensure that there's equal gender representation and at least ensure that there is a minimum of 30% female representation at all levels during the stakeholder consultation and capacity building to ensure that their voices are heard, not only heard, it's implemented. And at the decision-making level, we also ensure that there's a equal gender representation. So that's it. There remains a scope of continuous improvement in Bhutan, especially for PPP, as it is at a nascent stage. Thank you.
Awesome.
That's all.
Thank you for that reply. Thank you. Thank you very much. We quickly move to Ms. Margarita. What can you say is the role that innovation ecosystem development play in advancing women-led climate resilient agricultural initiatives, especially in emerging economies that you've worked with?
Yes, thank you for the question, Ogo. Partially, I replied in my previous intervention, but of course, the innovation ecosystem plays a relevant role in advancing climate resilient agriculture. especially when where women operate at the margins of formal markets and innovation system. Generally, what we have observed is that in this context, innovation ecosystem go far beyond technology. They should also encompass a network of actors. Therefore, again, PPP, as our colleagues widely explains, institutional support and infrastructure support that should enable the growing and fostering of new ideas and practices to emerge, scale, and sustain. When it comes to the inclusion in climate smart ecosystem, I believe there should be a combo between a knowledge network, especially to foster peer-to-peer exchange, financing mechanism, because often rural communities have different difficulties in accessing to loan or microfinance tools, mentorship program that will help to respond to the needs of women engaged in this sector. The following instruments should bridge, therefore, research institution, but also grassroots innovation and public policy, along with private investment, to enable the women not just to adopt the practice passively, but also to, let's say, adapt to them, refine this practice according to their needs, and scale up their diffusion among in the region they operate. And on the top of that, another key element for to foster innovation ecosystem is to amplify agency, because as I said in my previous intervention, women should not be treated only as beneficiary of intervention, but also as creators. So women should be involved in participatory research, women-led cooperatives wherever it is possible. For instance, in post-Soviet countries, cooperatives is very hard to achieve due to trauma from post-Soviet Union, I would say. And to have this locally embedded facilitator that can serve as a bridge between the rural communities and the different infrastructure existing within the context. On the top of that, I believe it would be wise to provide, as an example, a proposal that I'm currently preparing for Burundi, where the government of Burundi is actually doing this. Basically, they are not financing directly the women, but the infrastructure serving the rural communities. So as such, the MSMEs funds are not given directly to the women, but to all the agencies that work with the women in logistics, in energy. So they will create a sort of community-based infrastructure to promote this climate resilient and innovative technology in agriculture, aquaculture, dairy, as well, of course, as horticulture value chain.
Wow, okay. I hear you. Women should be more participatory, not just being the beneficiaries of funds and financing. I hear you. And on that note, I will just ask Ms. Hannah that as an entrepreneur advocating for sustainable community development, that what innovative business models can empower rural women in agricultural supply chains?
Okay, I'm muted now. I'm here. So to my earlier comment around looking at what Africa has and what is sustainable for us and creating solutions that are suitable for us, I would say let's work with what we have. A lot of models can be quite sophisticated and require a lot of resources, specifically from an energy perspective. So talking to what we have a handheld device, which is a phone, which is a digital phone, for example. We can use that to then create, like, for example, what I mentioned around the WhatsApp, create opportunities around the water by creating groups, utilizing some of the social media elements, be it Facebook. We now even have TikTok, right? And some of this can be utilized by our local farmers. And I keep emphasizing locally and rural farmers because that's what we are. That's the state of the country from that perspective. And utilizing this to then open the market for our communities. And because there's a big impact also to the youth, where we have women-led agricultural societies, they then bring their own children who are hopefully quite innovative to then create these groups on their behalf, which then in a way creates an element of employment, right? So there has to be that collaborative effort, seeing that what we are faced with in Africa tends to be quite different with what we have with the rest of the world. So let's utilize what we have.
Well, we have to get what we want.
Yes, utilize M-Pesa and e-wallet opportunities that are available in our context to then move money around. That's my suggestion.
Okay. So let's not leave Mr. Dodgy out of this final round. Mr. Dodgy, I just want your thoughts. Given your international project experiences, what are the most effective interventions that you've seen, from your projects that will enhance women's entrepreneurial capacity in agricultural supply chains, so that we can wrap up this?
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, I would like to echo some of the very interesting points that has been covered by earlier speakers, elements of, access to market, which I feel is very, very important. This is one of the main enabler for any woman entrepreneur to succeed in their, business venture. And also the other one is mentorship. Before my current position, I was working for one of the NGO as an executive director, where I've been supporting a lot of youth entrepreneurs. Access to finance is important, but what is more important is to have somebody where entrepreneur can share his or her ideas, so that they can bring life into the idea that they may have incubated for whatever number of period. So I think capacity building followed by access to finance, followed by mentoring to provide hand-holding support. I think that will make a huge difference in empowering women entrepreneurs. I think first and foremost, in Bhutan, we have increasing number of women who have proven beyond reasonable doubt in terms of their entrepreneurial competence, innovative thinking, hard work, and most importantly, their detail-oriented mindset. But I think while these attributes are critical, I feel it is important that women entrepreneurs should believe in themselves. I think they should have trust in their idea and try to execute the ideas that they have. And I feel that is the number one starting point. And also in the context like Bhutan, where we in a small society, closely knitted society, role models play a big role. Recognition and the support system, recognizing the successful and awarding the successful women entrepreneurs actually helps to serve as an inspiration. Younger generations have somebody to look up to as an inspiration. So I think in small societies like Bhutan, I think this sort of award system, recognition system actually helps to attract, helps to encourage and motivate a lot of young entrepreneurs. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. I just noticed that Azuka has left the call. I would have liked for her to have a final say, but then I think I'm going to just let Jyoti do the closing. And ladies and gentlemen, it's been a wonderful and very active participation from you and from the participants that I think they just want to go back and digest all that has been said. And I'm sure we're going to continue this conversation from Bhutan to Nigeria, from South Africa, from Central Asia, from Italy to Burundi, to everywhere that our women are doing tremendous things. Women are leading, communities are thriving, we're inclusive in our leadership patterns, entrepreneurial resilience, supportive partnerships. Let us continue this conversation, because this is actually a gender equity, not a peripheral concern. And behind all this, it is actually for the common good, for building up our women, for building up the youth, building up communities, and generally building up the entire nation. Thank you very much. And I'll yield the floor to Jyoti now for the closing comments. Thank you.
All right, so I think let's start with having a round of applause for all the panelists. You can use a react button at the bottom. I think this discussion has been so rich and so many different topics we covered in this discussion. It was an excellent, productive discussion, really. I appreciated all the hard work both the panelists and the moderator have put in, and audience was really alive and participation. So, and I can see so many congratulations coming from all of you. So this is just the beginning of an overdue discussion. Obviously, the topic was very deep. We covered at least, I think I counted about 4 or 5 topics in one sentence. So a lot to unpack. And we heard different experiences from different regions, and you can see the commonalities actually, you know, a lot of the women and let's not forget the men, right? I mean, gender equity is about the whole society. It's not just about women, and without men, we cannot really bring an equitable, we cannot, and we stagnate actually without development, overall development. So role of women, the importance of agriculture, connectivity in supply chains. These are all different paths to SDGs. I hope you will join me in congratulating Rinzin Pemo. So she's our new chair of the Gender Equity in PPPs Chapter in WAPPP. And I cannot say enough about this, really the first event which she has organized for WAPPP. So it has been really a wonderful experience. And I want to take advantage of Zia, the president of WAPPP, here with us to say actually the last words to close the session. Over to you, Ziad.
Thank you, Jyoti. Very kind of you to let me say something. I really appreciate it. I was blown away by the eloquence of all the speakers. I have rarely attended a webinar when, you know, all the speakers were so engaging, so with such great ideas, such excellent way of expressing their ideas. I'm truly delighted. And I just want to say thank you to Rinzin, thank you to you, Jyoti, for organizing this. And I really look forward to us working much more on this important topic in the future. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ziad. And thanks to Aisha, who's running the Secretariat and keeping us all online for this webinar. So thank you, Aisha. All right, I hope you will join us in the next webinars. The next one is on May 15th on local currency. And after that, so please subscribe to our YouTube channel and our LinkedIn, and please check out our website for all the forthcoming events. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.